Purdue has two of the top 5 players in the nation this year. Find out which one's going to become Purdue's 3rd National Player of the Year in just 4 years.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Nick Arvin, and today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We got a jam-packed episode coming in for you guys today, and the first topic of discussion for today's episode is going to be the National Player of the Year watch list, and that is the Wooden Award. That's an award that Purdue has a lot of familiarity with. Zach Edey obviously wins it back-to-back 2 times in the last 3 years, and this year, Purdue's in a unique situation because they have 2 guys in the top 5 of the FanDuel odds to see who's going to win that Wooden Award and who's going to be named the National Player of the Year. Before we get started today, I just wanted to say thank you guys to all the support as we launched this show last week. If you guys could, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. It helps us out a ton here at Locked On Boilermakers. My goal is to get us up to 1,000 subscribers before kickoff here in week 1, before Ball State. So if you guys would love to hit that subscribe button, if you guys would do that for me, I would very much appreciate it. But let's get right in to what's on the table today, and that is the Wooden Award. That's the National Player of the Year, and there are 2 guys for Purdue that's going to be looking to do that. 2 guys that are top 5 players in the nation, and that is Trey Kaufman-Renn and the man, the myth, the legend, Braden Smith. Braden Smith, I would say even more than a top 5 player. He's a best guard in the country by far, may just be the best player in the nation as we head into preseason, as we head into fall camp. Going into basketball season this year, there's been a lot of speculation, and I went out on social media earlier today at Nick Arvin Sports, on X, on Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and asked a question. For the Wooden Award, for the National Player of the Year, who do you think's going to win it? Is it going to be Braden Smith, or is it going to be a guy like Trey Kaufman-Renn? And the results were a little bit skewed. I was surprised to see as much support for one compared to the other. However, Braden Smith kind of ran away with that. You guys really thought that Braden Smith will win this award this year. He's going to be the National Player of the Year. I do agree. I agree that Braden Smith has all the opportunities in the world. And if I were a betting man, if I were to say, hey, I'm going to put down $100 on one of these guys, that be a Braden Smith or a Trey Kaufman-Renn, to win this award, I would say the smarter bet is a Braden Smith. I would say, hey, if you want to go for the big bang, if you want to go for a dark horse guy, Trey Kaufman-Renn, maybe your answer. But if we go into Braden Smith and what makes him such a good candidate for this award, when you look at why he's the favorite to win this award, alongside with Purdue being the favorites to win the national championship, his playmaking ability has a lot to do with that. We talk about a guy who we spoke about last week on the show, is one of the few pure point guards of a dying breed. He's on pace to break the all-time assist record, and that's not just for the Big Ten. He's going to break that one earlier in the year, but he's on pace, needs to average out 8 assists and stay healthy throughout the year, but he's on pace to break the all-time college basketball assist leading record, and that's something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough throughout the national media that covers him, throughout his peers, throughout whether that be social media, the sports talk shows on TV, whatever you see, they don't talk about Braden Smith. They don't talk about who this guy is, what he's done for Purdue, and the accolades that he's really built up. And it shows in the odds. It shows when this guy's projected to be Purdue's 3rd National Player of the Year in just 4 years, when you account for Zach Edey winning it twice. This is a guy that deserves to be in the spot he's in, and a guy that, as Purdue fans, we should really appreciate the fact that he's in this position. So we talk about Braden Smith. He's worthy if he breaks that assist record, which many people think he's has the opportunity to do, think that he will be able to do. I think that he has all the potential in the world to be able to break that record. If he breaks that record, there's no doubt about it. He's winning the Wooden Award. He's winning the National Player of the Year credits. And that's just how it is. When you submit yourself in history, he's already a Purdue legend. He's going to be a legend in the Big Ten. But when you submit yourself as an overall college basketball legend, you have to be selected for that award. Those sports writers that vote for the guys that get paid the big bucks to make those decisions, you have to pick a guy like Braden Smith. But let's talk about Trey Kaufman-Renn, a guy who I was surprised wasn't getting enough talk about as this award winner, as a potential guy on the Wooden watch list. I think that Trey Kaufman-Renn has a really good shot to do that. And when I say that surface level, we know, hey, Trey Kaufman-Renn's a great player. He was great for Purdue last year. He played at center. He'll be at power forward, somewhere he's a little bit more comfortable at this year. We saw 20-plus points being averaged by him last year. We got to think that production is going to go up. We think, hey, you pair a senior Braden Smith, whose playmaking has completely evolved from 8.7 assists on the year last year throughout fall camp, throughout summer camp, when the group was playing together. We saw he's really been balling out throughout practice, evolving as a playmaker. When you put Trey Kaufman-Renn at the 4, when you think about that pick and roll between Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn, when you think about what Renn is going to be able to do at the 4 spot, when you think about his ability to become a triple threat scorer, we saw decent efficiency, or a 3-level scorer at that. We saw decent efficiency last year from the 3-point line. Didn't like to shoot it a whole bunch, but when he did shoot it, he made it a decent amount, shooting over 40% from the field from 3-point. And if you can evolve that, if you can create a space where you can pick and pop, kind of get behind that 3-point line and space out what you're trying to do offensively even more, when you're able to bang down that shot, it just opens up what Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to be able to do for this Purdue offense. It opens up his production and what his ceiling is as a scorer. And that's something that we're going to see when you talk about this award. That's something you're going to see when you talk about who he is as a player, what he wants to do as a basketball player, and kind of what he wants to be going into this year for Purdue, where there are a lot of expectations. I expect Braden Smith to definitely be in that running for the Wooden Award. I expect him to be the presumed National Player of the Year throughout most parts of the year. I expect him to be the favorite throughout most parts of the year. But when we're talking about a high value guy to put your money on, to expect to be a dark horse candidate for this team, for that National Player of the Year award, Trey Kaufman-Renn is your guy. Since 2018, we haven't seen a guard win this award since 2018. Jalen Brunson was the last guard to do it for Villanova in 2018. Ever since then, we've seen forwards and bigs win that award predominantly for the last 7 years. And you got to think, hey, that favors Trey Kaufman-Renn. We see this is the formula. This is what these voters tend to look for. They look for a high-value big that produces for their team. And like I said earlier, if Braden Smith breaks that record, there's no doubt it's his award to lose. There's nothing that's going to take that award away from him. But when you think about what the ceiling can be for Trey Kaufman-Renn this year, when you think about how he's evolved as a scorer, how he's evolved as a defender, he has the opportunity to really turn some heads off what was already an all-caliber season last year. He showed that he's here to play. He showed that he's the next great player at Purdue, but he can be so much more for this Boilermaker team. He can really take that jump like Zach Edey did. He can really take that jump into being this prolific National Player of the Year contender, and we see that. He's already a top 5 player in the nation now. He can jump into that top 3, top 2 discussion that Braden Smith's in, and really be that guy for Purdue this year, alongside Braden Smith, alongside Fletcher Loyer, alongside Oscar Clough. We'll see. We'll see what it can be, but it's an interesting dynamic this year when you have 2 guys fighting for that award, when you have 2 guys that obviously it's a friendly competition, but it's so fun as a Purdue fan sitting here, for me covering the team, to see these 2 guys that are very highly competitive individuals that both want this award, both want to fight for this award. And we should see a fun product on the court. We should see a fun product this season going forward as we see these 2 guys climb up and down the ladder for the Wooden Award for the National Player of the Year. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the season. We'll keep our eyes on this topic. But next, the AP poll came out today for college football. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means for Purdue, what that means for the Big Ten, and what that means for some of the teams Purdue plays this year. And we'll have that for you next. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for their show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endlessly scrolling, trying to find the best deals? Well, Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in the section for you. Want to see your spot from Ross-Ade this coming fall? Want to see your spot for Mackey this winter? Well, use Gametime. See what they can give you and see what that seat view is going to look like right from your seat. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the preseason AP poll came out today, the first one so far of the year. And then there's some interesting tidbits for Purdue fans out there. There are interesting factoids for that Purdue fan base. And we talk a little bit about that. Obviously, the Boilermakers didn't crack the top 25 like I don't think anybody expected after 1-11 last year. But you see that revamped roster with Barry Odom this year, and they're going to have to be things proved on the field. If the Boilermakers want to crack that top 25, I don't see that happening this year. But when we look at this AP poll, and I'll pull it up, there are some things that are really interesting for Purdue. There are 5 out of the 12 teams that Purdue are going to play in the regular season crack this AP poll, that being Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Illinois, and Indiana, who comes in at number 20. That's an interesting little layout, but a big story in that is there are 5 out of 12, which is huge. It's almost half of the teams you play are ranked in the preseason AP poll. That just shows that Purdue has a bit of a gauntlet. We talked about kind of Purdue's roster or schedule, rather. We talked about their schedule earlier in the season and later in the season. On a little tidbit we did with Spencer McLaughlin over on Locked On College Football. We'll talk about that and we'll show that later for you guys on the show. But when we talk about just these opponents straight up in the preseason AP poll, these are some strong teams that Purdue's going to face. And teams like USC, teams like Washington, they weren't able to make it into this AP top 25 poll. And that's insane to me. When you have a team like USC that's going to be as explosive as they are on the offensive side of the ball, when you bring in a Washington team that obviously we're rebuilding a little bit last year without Kalen DeBoer, you lose your head coach who had so much success there. You're going to need a bit of a year to kind of deal with all that turnover. But Washington's going to be a good football team this year. USC is going to be a good football team this year. So when you talk about that, and that's not even discussing, hey, a Minnesota, they have a schedule where they could be permitted to potentially touch that AP poll at times this year. Rutgers, which is a team that we haven't talked a lot about, they'll be much improved. There are tons of teams this year in the Big Ten, specifically that Purdue's going to face, that are going to be top of the top, cream of the crop, and it shows how good, how competitive the Big Ten is right now. There's so much talk about the SEC, how deep the SEC is, and how the Big Ten's a little bit top heavy, whether that be Ohio State, Penn State, bringing in Oregon now. But that's not the case anymore. The Big Ten has really been priding itself, building itself in recent years under NIL, into being a more competitive conference from top to bottom. And we see that with the AP poll. We see that with 5 teams that Purdue's facing this year, ranked in that preseason top 25. And I just see that keep on adding. We'll talk about USC a little bit later on the show with Spencer, but that's a team that could find itself ranked going into a week 3 matchup against Purdue in Ross-Ade. I don't see Purdue winning 8, 9, 10 games this year. That's just the fact of it. As much as I would like to see Barry Odom show out like Curt Cignetti did last year, Indiana didn't have the schedule that Purdue did this year. Indiana had a little bit of luck of that draw. They didn't have to play some of the competition that we're going to have to see Purdue play this year, whether that be Ohio State. We saw Indiana take on Ohio State last year, fall short. But when you look at that gauntlet down the stretch, when you look at Michigan, when you look at Ohio State at home, and then you go to Washington, then you get Indiana. That's a tough stretch down the last month of the year. And that's a schedule that when you look at how strong the Big Ten is, there's the games that are winnable this year for Purdue come few and far between. But I still do stand by the take that I had. I stand by the fact that I think that Purdue has the chance. They have the schedule. They have a path to winning 6 or 7 games. They have the path to being a bowl team this year. And as strong as the Big Ten is, as strong as some of these teams are throughout the Big Ten, whether that be a Michigan and Ohio State and Indiana, a Penn State who cracks in at number 2. And we'll talk about that for a sec. Penn State jumping Ohio State. I can't believe that in the preseason AP poll. Ohio State has been so dominant for so long. They have Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. They're 2 of the top players in the country this year. They should be ahead of Penn State. But I'll get off my ladder for a bit and come back to some of the Purdue talk. This is a year that when you think about what Purdue wants to do, what they want to be, it's going to be a year of finding an identity, creating an identity. And if you're able to win a game against one of these ranked teams, if you're able to win maybe even 2 games against one of these ranked teams, that really just speaks a lot for the success that this year is going to be. You're not expecting perfection as a Purdue fan. You're not expecting winning, like I said, 10 games for Barry Odom in his first year. But what we are expecting is competitive football. If you're able to tune in on Saturday, and I'll pull up this graphic once more, and tune in and see Purdue compete with a team like USC, who obviously gets snubbed from this top 25, or compete with an Indiana on Black Friday this year, to compete with a team like Illinois at Ross-Ade. That's what you want as a Purdue fan. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to build a culture of competitive football that the fans want to see. We've strayed away under Ryan Walters. We strayed away last year. We strayed away the year before. It wasn't that long ago that Jeff Brom was winning games, and he brought excitement into West Lafayette. He created that crazy environment in Ross-Ade that some of these players have been talking about lately. We need that back for Purdue. That doesn't mean winning 4 or 5 Big Ten ranked games this year. We know that conference is going to be crazy. We know Purdue has a rough schedule ahead of them. We know that's a crazy schedule. The strength of schedule is tough this year. But that's what happens when you're in the Big Ten. That's what happens when you play meaningful football every Saturday. And as a Purdue fan, the Boiler Faithfuls need to hope, and Barry Odom and his staff, the players on the field, need to bring a level of competitive football this year. They need to bring a team that comes ready to play, a functional locker room, and a team that's going to give Purdue fans what they want to see on Saturdays and going forward. I had the opportunity to speak with Locked On College Football's own Spencer McLaughlin earlier today. And for our last segment of the show, I'm going to show that interview I had with Spencer, where we talk about Purdue, where we talk about what that team can be, and I give off a bit of a hot take about a pivotal game on Purdue's schedule. Check that out here next.
For those of you Halloween fans out there, the most mysterious team in the Big Ten is easily Purdue. Nick Arvin of Locked On Boilermakers is here, one of our newest hosts here at the network, to discuss. So, Nick, the reason I say this is a mystery team, and some people might see what I'm about to say as a cop-out, but it's my show. I'm the EP, so too bad. I'm not making a record prediction on Purdue over or under their win total of 3.5, which is the lowest in the Big Ten. There's too much mystery here. I'm trying to find information. I know information about Purdue. I know what Barry Odom's track record was at UNLV. That was really impressive. I know they have 54 new players, but I don't know what to make of that. Is there a middle ground, perhaps, between last season and Curt Cignetti at Indiana that Purdue is going to find here, or do you think it's going to be one way or the other?
Absolutely. So I've been talking a lot about that on the show, actually. We've been talking a lot about, hey, we were in a Big Ten championship game just 3 years ago under Jeff Brom. We stray from that under Ryan Walters, and you're not going to find that instantly in the Big Ten. In a conference that's as competitive as the Big Ten has become lately, you're not going to find that instant Big Ten championship for a team that was 1-11 last year. So when I feel like we look at what Purdue fans want, what this staff wants, the expectation should be a bowl game. You want a bowl game. You want 6 or 7 wins. Obviously, Vegas, FanDuel has that line set at 3.5. But when you look at some of the games on the schedule, when you look at some of the transfers that Barry Odom has very intentionally brought into his team to create a winning brand of football, you see those wins start to come in. You see wins that may flip in a team that may turn some heads this fall.
54 is a lot.
Absolutely.
of new players, Nick. It's a. Is it fair to expect that Barry Odom just makes it work right away with a schedule that I think it's somewhere in between a Murderer's Row and Cupcake Central, because you have a lot of tough games. There are some games that I look at and go, I mean, maybe. Possibly. We're going to get to a really important one early in the season because they're going to start with 2 wins, or at least they should, against Ball State and Southern Illinois. The Salukis, I believe, is Southern Illinois' mascot. So they'll start with a couple wins there. But what do you even expect just from a team standpoint with all those new players? Do you think you could have completely different rotations by the time the season comes to a close compared to what, Barry Odom and company rolled out in the first month of the season? Because I think that's entirely feasible and perfectly reasonable as well for the Boilermakers staff to say, you know what, we've got all these new guys. We're going to try a bunch of different formulas. We're going to look at what works here. And you know what? It might not work right away. And this is a season where you're playing with house money and you got to tinker and figure out what works.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with what you're saying. Whenever you have some roster turnover, as much as Barry Odom does have this year, in a first-year head coaching position at Purdue, you have to expect, hey, this team is probably not going to be perfect right away. You can't put these heavy expectations on a team when you have these unique circumstances. You see what Curt Cignetti did last year at Indiana, and that gets the fan base excited, that makes people want to see that at Purdue. That makes fans who have cherished what this program has been historically. We've strayed so far from that under Ryan Walters' tenure, going 1-11 last year, and fans want to get back to that excitement that Purdue football used to bring. And sometimes you just have to make sure that we maintain the expectations. Hey, let's give Barry Odom some leeway. He's in his first year as a head coach. You bring in all these transfers, and maybe you need this year to really kind of get everybody on the same page. When you look at what we have in training camp, Barry Odom's been very kind of specific about what happens in fall camp is more about reps. What happens in the scrimmages is really going to determine what happens on his depth chart. And I could see that depth chart kind of changing during those scrimmages. I could even see it changing halfway throughout the year once we see who rises above the crop, who really performs this year, and who shows his asset to winning games for Purdue.
So the Boilermaker schedule has, frankly, a great home slate for fans there in West Lafayette who just want to go to the games and have fun. You're going to have some good games. You're going to have some big opportunities to get a landmark sort of win. And I talk about this with every coach that takes over a program that has to be rebuilt, not necessarily in year 1, but sometimes really by year 2, you want to have a win that you can point to and say, that was a turning point. That was a moment where the fans got bought in, the donors got bought in, the national media started to turn their heads, and in the locker room, you really started to feel, okay, there's something here. We can do something with what this coach is building. That opportunity comes in the 3rd game of the year, Nick, because USC comes to town, and look, I've picked USC to win that football game. I'm just talking about the opportunity here. USC comes to Purdue this year. Rutgers is a winnable game as well. They go at Notre Dame. They've got Illinois coming to town. They've got Indiana coming to town. Those are the games that if Barry Odom wants to endear himself to the Purdue fan base right away, he'll find a way to go and pull an upset in one of those games. And if he does, the train might be right back on the tracks.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about scheduling this offseason, Spencer. People don't have a lot to talk about. So you look to Miami, who's made the nationwide headlines. They don't leave the state of Florida until November, I believe it is. And it's absolutely insane. Purdue's schedule isn't quite to that extent. But when you look at their schedule, they don't leave the state of Indiana until week 7 following their bye week. You face USC at home in week 3. You face Illinois at home in week 5, I believe, after a tough game in South Bend against Notre Dame. But when you look at USC, this has been my first big take of the year. This has been something that I really hold my hat on. I believe that Purdue can upset USC at I believe that Purdue can start the season off 3-0. You beat Ball State week 1. You beat Southern Illinois week 2. We saw some trouble stopping the run last year for USC. We see Barry Odom has focused on making a run-heavy offense that fits in a guy like Devin Mockabee, who has been an extremely underrated running back, has been at Purdue his whole career, ready to break that Purdue rushing record this year. That's another hot take. But I think that Purdue has the opportunity to upset USC at Ross-Ade this year. I think that they have the ability to bring them down and then start that season off 3-0 going into South Bend. I don't see that one going out too well in South Bend against a team that was in the national championship last year. But I think week 3 is one to circle for Purdue fans. I think that's one that there may be a little bit of a surprise in that game.
I paused right there so that I can make sure I get a nice clean clip of what you just said, and we'll see how we might be seeing how USC fans feel about that. I'll close with this question to you, Nick. Your record prediction for Purdue this year in Barry Odom's first season is what?
You know, honestly, I've been talking about it. I expect a bowl game this year for Barry Odom and the boys. I do. I know the Vegas win total's at 3.5. I expect Barry Odom and squad to get at least 6 wins this year. I'll settle for 6-7, 7-6, somewhere in that range, kind of in a middle tier. I think those 2 games to start are definitely winnable. I think that it's possible to win it against the USC. And then I think a team like Northwestern, a team like Rutgers, those are both wins. You find your 6 wins in there on that schedule. That last month is an absolute gauntlet. You got at Washington, you got Ohio State, at Ross-Ade, you got Indiana. Those are some tough games in there. So I don't see how many Purdue will win on that little stretch, but I think the early part of the schedule is very vital to what Purdue's going to do. I think they can pull out a bowl game this year.
Oh boy, that would be something. That would beating USC. If Purdue beats USC, Lincoln Riley is not going to have a fun time. My guy Yogi Roth of the Big Ten Network will have perhaps an even less fun time watching his Trojans in that particular moment. But you're saying value on over 3.5. I'll give you an olive branch on that front, Nick. Arizona State's win total last year, which I thought was an easy over, was 4.5. They won the Big 12. I'll just throw that out there. A little optimism for Boilermaker fans. Nick Arvin, Locked On Boilermakers. Great stuff, my man. Appreciate everyone listening.
Thank you for everybody for tuning in to Locked On Boilermakers. Again today, for your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Braden Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys again for tuning in with me today. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.